Hello, everyone. Good evening from Bangkok.
Good morning from Kansas City.
And good afternoon for our friends and audience in Europe or in the Middle East. Welcome to episode 8 SSKL. And tonight we're talking about Let's Eat. And our apology for the delay for about 15 minutes for kicking off the show, because for some reason this evening we basically could not get Zoom to be stream onto the Facebook pages, and we tried to figure out a way to do it on Lisa's page, my page here, changing from laptop to phone, but nothing really worked. So we decided we'll go ahead anyway, since the platform is on Zoom. We don't want it to stop or delay because simply we couldn't do Facebook. So if you're watching this, thank you for joining us here now live on Zoom, or as and when you watch the replay. So tonight, as I said, we're going to talk about Let's Eat, talk about food. We spent the last 7 episodes on various more serious subjects, and Lisa and I thought, well, why not we talk about something else, something a bit more lighthearted, something a bit more fun, not so serious. But in the end, we found out that the conclusion that we have, as we always do, still come back to the same point. But let's go through different routes tonight. So Lisa.
Spoiler alert, Kitty, spoiler alert. You spoiled it for everybody.
Oh, sorry, did I?
No,
so
I have to watch to find out. Yeah. Let's talk about food. Yeah. Who doesn't love to eat?
Yeah, tell me about it. You know, we all love eating, and currently there are so many different diets out there. You know, you've got people who don't have food, or you've got people who are trying to lose weight and cut, you know, the food consumption, all sorts of things from one extreme to another. And that's why we thought, well, why don't we talk about it? Especially, I think many people are doing emotional eatings as well because of what's going on in the world. Either you're still being locked down, or whether you are in some sort of very stressful situation. I think many of us do reach out for food as comfort. And that's why we thought, well, why don't we talk about it? I love eating. Lisa loves eating. We talk about food all the time. And that's why tonight it's all about food. So Lisa, why don't you tell us, you know, what do you like eating, you know, and why do you eat what you eat?
Wow, that's such a fantastic question. Thank you, Kitty. And I do love talking about food. And I want to welcome Steve, who's joining us live on our Zoom.
Yeah, hi, Steve.
So thanks for being here, Steve. You know, my personal philosophy is really simply summed up as I eat what I want. Okay. But there's a little bit of backstory behind that. What I want to eat most times, not always, but most times, what I want to eat is a mostly plant-based diet. So I follow probably 95% plant-based. Sometimes when I'm out to dinner, I'll order some fish. I love sushi, so I love to eat that. My cousin Diana in Iowa raises eggs, she raises chickens that then therefore produce the eggs. So I love to eat her eggs. And she also raises goats, and she makes the most amazing goat's cheese. So I do eat that as well. So you can see I truly just eat what I want. I know what works for my own body, and I adjust accordingly.
So have you been eating like this all the way long in your life, or has it been, you know, various changes, or, you know, surely you so how has it been evolving then, your eating journey?
Yeah, for sure. You know, I've been vegetarian for quite some time, for decades, and I think I sort of went about it as a way to feel healthier. And so I just thought intuitively that eating a lot of meat probably wasn't the best for my body. But when I look back as a child, I grew up in Iowa, which if you're watching from Bangkok or London, you have no idea where Iowa is, but it's a rural state in the middle of the country, right? In the middle of the US. My my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, they were all farmers. So I grew up in these farm settings where everybody had a garden. Everybody also had their own chickens, their own eggs. There was a lot of meat getting eaten, but I just always was drawn to the side dishes more than I was anything else. So if I really look back about it, when I was younger, my body was telling me then what I preferred. Yeah. And then as an adult, I started experimenting and became vegetarian first. And now I'm settled pretty comfortably into sort of the mostly plant-based, but again, you know, I eat some fish. I eat eggs. Potato chips are vegan, as you know.
You say
What about
potato
you?
chips. Well,
Crisps.
I think
To you.
it's interesting. Yeah, crisps. It's interesting because that makes us really think, and I often think about it, is how we eat is how we are brought up. So when you look at people, coming from the States, especially, from the middle part, is very meat orientated. If you were surrounded by farmers when you were young, naturally you would just eat what's offered on the table, right? And same thing for me being Hong Kong Chinese. So literally, we have a saying: anything with the four legs not facing up to the sky, that is, as long as it's still alive, we'll eat it. So someone was asking me about chicken's feet, especially for us Hong Kong Chinese with dim sum, it's all steamed up with black bean and garlic sauce, and he was asking me, what does it taste like? I said, there's only one way to find out, is to taste it. I mean, it's an acquired taste, but not up, not to everyone's palate. So for me, what I eat now to what I used to it is completely different. It's like what you said, how we were brought up. So I've gone through a little journey myself from eating anything, that my mum and dad could put on the table, to being really clean, to vegan for a while. But that was when I was living in LA. It was so easily done. And then, of course, then I, met my husband. I turned British, as I always joked about, so I started drinking wine and eating meat. But that's a very typical generalization. To now, very much like you, I think it's how my body has been telling me little hints here and there. So I also focus mostly 90% plant-based, whole, mostly fruit and veg. If I can eat salad, I do. But again, it's back to the point of what we're taught and how our body reacts. So like the last 2 weeks, I have not been feeling great. So eating salad for me is the last thing in my mind. So all I wanted was something warm and hot. So it's a lot of soupy noodles, not so much about eating the noodles or anything, but more about the soup. And I basically didn't fancy anything raw and uncooked. And it makes you really think, if you listen to your body. I don't know whether part of it is what we're brought up with, because that's what my mum used to give me when I wasn't well, to now, it's like when I'm not well, I want something nice and easy, something soothing, versus, if you give me a plate of salad when I'm not well, I just have no taste to it whatsoever. So my journey has been going like this. And of course, as when we age, I think, our palate changes as well. I don't know, it's the same for everyone. For how I'm observing my mum and dad, their palates seem to change, every other week for my dad right now. It's definitely an interesting journey for everyone to go through. That is, if we pay attention to it at all.
I think paying attention is always the key, right? And I find it really interesting, Kitty. You mentioned that when you're not well, you want cooked, warm, what sounds to me like more nourishing foods. And as you know, and as our viewers may know, I'm also a yoga instructor, and Ayurveda is the science, the sister science to yoga that goes along with it. And Ayurveda teaches us that raw foods are very difficult to digest. So
absolutely, yeah.
Cooked foods like soups, stews, even curries that are already cooked are much easier for your body to assimilate the nutrients from. So it makes total sense that your body, whether it was from growing up or not, maybe just some higher order rule, right? Your body just knows, your mom just knew, your body just knows to eat something that will be more easily digestible, so your system doesn't have to work so hard. I think that's so cool.
Well, higher order or not, I don't know, because the Chinese TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, is the same. So they don't, if I go to see a TCM doctor, he would say a big no-no if I tell him I eat raw food or drink smoothies or juice. Everything that's not cooked is an absolute no-no from a TCM perspective, whether you're well or unwell. And I think every module, if you like, has a different way of approaching it. And I think the most important way to understand if it works is how you actually respond, from your body. My body responds very well with TCM and Ayurvedic. So we just have to go with what feels good. I think that, that's the bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So interesting too to hear the parallels between traditional TCM and Ayurveda. I mean, these ancient traditions are so wise, right? Because they didn't have the science, so to speak, the data that we have now to inform their decisions. So
Mm.
they had to go on experience and just it seemed like common sense to me, right?
Well, that's why I guess we picked this topic, Lisa, because when we talk about less eat, there are so many different ways of looking at it, so much information, if not misinformation often,
Mm.
to the point that I feel, including myself, that you just don't know what to trust, which path is the path, if there is the path, and what we should try, because everybody has a different belief system. So when we talk about let's eat, as part of, nourishment, pleasure, and success, and we kind of break it down into 6W so that we can help our friends and audience to really understand how do we actually approach eating other than, Lisa and I talked about our separate experience. So the first thing is, we hear a lot about we are what we eat. Are we, Lisa?
Yeah. Oh, wow. That is such a tough question. I think that we very much are definitely what we eat in some sense, but I think there is this misinformation, as you labeled it, and you aptly called it, Kitty, that if we just eat a certain type of diet and walk 10,000 steps every day, that we'll be healthy and we'll be fit and we'll be sound in body and sound in mind. And I simply don't think that that's true. I think that what we eat is very important. We have to pay attention to how we feel. We can't simply just eat potato chips and ice cream all the time, right? There's,
We turn into chips and ice cream.
yeah, we would exactly turn into potato chips and ice cream. I mean, we would not be healthy, right? So what we eat is extremely important. But you mentioned the 6 Ws. So I'd love to maybe go on and mention a couple of the other ones, if that's okay with you, Kitty.
Yeah, there's one crucial point I want to bring out, because this we are what we eat. I feel there's a lot of misunderstanding, because like what I said earlier on, I met someone today and she told me she's vegetarian, but when I actually look at her in our modern day terms, for me, she's very overweight, for the frame that she has. And I feel that lots of the people sometimes think, well, I'm plant-based, I'm vegan, I'm
Mm.
vegetarian. But the terms don't mean anything. If you're vegetarian, very good, you don't eat meat. But if all you eat is like simple carbs, just rice after rice, or pizza, margarita pizza after margarita pizza, and you're eating a lot less of fresh veg and fruit, you could be the best plant-based, or vegan, however you term it. But if we're not actually focusing on the wholesome and non-processed food, it means absolutely zero. Because when I look at some people, they might be vegetarian, but they're drinking a can of Coca-Cola every day, and that is not healthy at all. So I think a lot of the time we are what we eat. We've got to understand the meaning behind what we eat. What is the what? What term do we actually even put it out there? I know plant-based right now is very sexy because it's the thing, to talk about, but it's the same thing. If we are not actually breaking down what we eat as a percentage, whether you're vegetarian or vegan or not, but if we're not actually focusing on the wholesome and non-processed food, it doesn't matter what we eat in the end.
100%, 100%. And especially here in the US, you've said it. I don't know. It's very similar to the fat-free days of the
Mm.
late 80s and the 90s, where we were fed this idea that if we only ate fat-free, we could eat everything we wanted. We could eat anything we wanted and we would lose weight, right? It was simply the diet industry, or perhaps the sugar industry feeding us this, pun intended, right? So it's
Yeah,
very
yeah.
similar today. If you go plant-based, if you're vegan, if you stop eating meat, you'll be super healthy and you'll be super thin. Well, so therefore, cue in the rise of vegan junk food, which particularly in the US, you can buy vegan potato chips, vegan cheese curls, vegan ice cream, vegan hot dogs, vegan burgers. I mean, the list goes on. So your point is very well taken. That does not mean healthy. not at
And
all.
I want to share a joke because of all the diets going out there. I remember someone said to me, skipping breakfast, bad idea.
Mm.
Intermittent fasting, great idea. It's like same thing, different perspective. And when I saw that, I thought it was hilarious. How very simple, just skipping about breakfast. And if you talk about my mum, it's like, you've got to eat breakfast before you go to school. It's a bad thing if you skip breakfast. But now everybody's talking about, oh, fasting is good, skipping breakfast is good. I think everything works, but whether it actually works for us or not, or we are the one who are to decide.
Well, and I think what your overall goal is the most important thing. So are you, is one person wanting to lose weight? Are they wanting to be thinner? Are they wanting to gain weight? Are they wanting to be healthy? Are they wanting to be strong? Are they wanting to age healthily? Are we wanting to eat for brain health, right? It depends on what our goal is, right? So for me, it's always a matter of health first, and generally the rest regulates. If we eat for health, our weight will normally stabilize. And of course, there are people with conditions that we're not aware of, and we're not qualified to speak to. But that's a great generalization, I think.
Yeah. Let's move to after what we eat. Is the next thing is, when do we actually eat?
Yeah.
Now, typically, people will be looking at 3 meals a day or 5 meals a day. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think I know that the intermittent fasting is very trendy these days. One aspect that I really do like from that is to have at least 12 hours before your last bite at night. And if you're going to eat breakfast, your breakfast. To me, that just makes sense. Like, we don't need to be in the kitchen at midnight having a snack, right? That just doesn't. And so to me, the 12-hour window seems to make a lot of sense. I like that. I like that a lot. It's generally accepted that if we eat late at night, it's really hard for our body to digest it while we're sleeping, and it's probably not a good idea. As far as the breakfast, a lot of science does show, again, depending on your goal, that people who are trying to lose weight,
Yeah.
trying to lose weight, that those people who do eat a good, healthful breakfast, you may have heard breakfast like a king, lunch like a queen, dinner like a pauper, that it just, again, it seems to make sense that if we're consuming more of our calories earlier in the day, we have more opportunity to burn them off. So there is some science behind that. Yeah. But personally, I do normally eat breakfast, but I don't eat till I'm hungry. So I'm not always hungry first thing in the morning. So I wait until I'm hungry, and then I eat breakfast.
Yeah, I think it's important, because I noticed that a lot of people just kind of run on an autopilot. There's 3 meals. Oh, 8 o'clock breakfast. It's like, oh, 1 o'clock, let's go for lunch. Oh, 7 o'clock, let's go for dinner. But are we even hungry? That's the thing. We're not like following a rigid timetable. A lot of timetable comes from whether the hunger comes out. But many of us, and I think because we are so used to the habits and the timetable that we have, and especially food has become more like a social event than a functional, options that we need to eat. So many times, like some of my friends, first thing, coffee. And I was like, well, hang on a minute. Are you drinking it because you need it, or you drink it out of habit? Are you even aware of you doing it? So I think the when to eat isn't so much about 3 meals or 5 meals a day, like what you say. Sometimes you don't have breakfast. So some people just wake up, they don't feel hungry, so therefore they don't eat. Whether it's a good thing or bad thing, I don't really know. Like my daughter, she's not a morning person. So for her, eating breakfast is not important. But for her, I can see that she's much, much more a late eater. So dinner time, after dinner, she snacks here and there. So she consumes most of her food in the evening, versus my son, he consumes most of the food in the morning, if not throughout the day. So I don't know whether it's because everyone has a different way of doing things, and including eating patterns.
Well, and I think what's really important is to learn to recognize the signals, right? So to help people with this, which it can be very challenging, especially if you've, again, our upbringing you know, we eat
Mm.
breakfast at 7, you eat lunch at 11:30. I mean, here in the US, people are eating lunch at 11:30, which that feels like brunch to me, right? Because I spent several years living overseas. And then we eat dinner at 5:30 or 6. Now, this would be the Midwestern sensibility, right? Because you got to get up, you got to eat breakfast, and you got to probably do some chores, and then you got to go to school, and then so it's all very related to, again, perhaps habit. But what I love to do to help people figure out is I call it a hunger scale. So if you
Mm.
imagine like a temperature scale, there's a 0 on the bottom and a 10 on the top, and learn to
Mm.
recognize where we are on the hunger scale. Am I at a 2? Am I at a 5? So often we wait until we're at a 9 or a 10, which also might be categorized as hangry, you know, or if I don't get something to eat now, I'm going to gnaw your leg off. You know, I mean, it's like if we wait till we're at a 10 on the hunger scale, we're more likely to make poor food choices, right? So I really encourage people to start to notice, what does a 2 on the hunger scale feel like? What does a 5 on the hunger scale feel like? And start preparing for food, you know, at a 5 or less, instead of waiting until a 9 or a 10. But yeah, just a little bit more on when. Maybe we should move on. I could talk about this all
Yeah, yeah,
day.
yeah, yeah. I know, I know. Okay, so the next one is who, who are we being with when we are eating? I think that makes a huge impact, especially, for me, we have so many festivals in the Chinese calendar, and every festival, believe it or not dissimilar to the US when you have Thanksgiving, Christmas. You just got a bunch of people, mostly family members, if not friends, sitting together and having a big feast, 10 dishes, 7 dishes, And of course, when we're happy, we tend to eat more. And then it becomes more like a social event than an actual, eating event, if you like.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, there was this fantastic book a few decades ago, and it was also made into a film called like Water for Chocolate. I don't know if you happen to see
Yeah,
that,
that's
Kitty.
right.
So if you recall, when the main character, if she was sad when she was cooking, when
Mm.
people ate the food she cooked, they would become sad and cry. If she was happy, they would become happy. If she were angry, right? It goes on. So I think the same goes for us. When we are absorbing nutrition,
Mm.
of course, our mental state comes into play with how we assimilate and how we digest the food. So yeah,
Mm.
if we're with our families and it's a celebration and we're having a fantastic time, you know, we can probably eat all of the turkey and the stuffing and the pumpkin pie, and maybe in your case the moon cake, which maybe you'll tell us about. And maybe it just
Yeah.
gets digested and assimilated just fine by us, you know, because we're happy, we're celebrating, we're with family. However, if we're alone and we're sad and we're eating, you know, ice cream out of the gallon or potato chips out of the pound bag, who are we being when we're doing that? And that's an entire different story, I think, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think, the point being is that, who we are with has a great impact in what we eat and when we eat as well, the 2W that we talked before. So they're all very tightly linked, and that's why we need to bring the awareness. And we encourage our friends and audience here to really think about let's eat. It's more than just foods. There's loads of things behind it. So let's move on to the next one, where we eat. And here, I know some people like to sit down and eat. Some people, they can eat whilst they walk. Some people, they like watch TV when they eat. And I think for me, before having kids, we used to have a little tray and we do not TV dinner, but home cooked dinner, but we'll watch whatever that we fancy watching. But now with kids, um, I want them to understand when you eat, you don't get distracted. So, when we eat, there's no TV, there's no radio, it's just a whole family getting together. And for us, it's a very important time of the day because we only get to talk to them really during dinner time as a whole family. Otherwise, they're in school, we're at work and this and that. So where we eat is always, proper dinner table, just so that there's a habit. And I think for those people, if they are on the run when you have to sit in the car and eat, and I think which happens more often for people in bigger countries when they have to travel quite far, like in the US, then, it does affect, what they eat, how they eat, and when they eat as well.
For sure. And I would say a great example would be in front of the TV. And I'm with you,
Mm.
you know, Rob and I, we make a home cooked dinner. We have TV trays, you know, we have those stands, and sometimes we will sit there and eat a meal and watch a program.
Oh,
Do
lucky you.
I know, right? No kids, no kids. But do
Sit
I
down.
do I advise that? I mean, sure, sometimes. Do I advise that all the time? No. And I think the main reason I don't suggest folks eat in front of the TV, in front of the computer, in front of the work, or, you know, in the car, God forbid, is because if we are not paying attention solely to what we're eating, we are so much more likely to eat quickly, to not chew our food properly, to not be aware. We're much more likely to eat fast, overeat. And again, it seems like, especially in this country, so many people are trying to lose weight. Two-thirds of all Americans are overweight or obese. Two-thirds. So often weight loss is front of people's minds. One of the best things we can do is, when we eat, just eat and pay attention to the food, not be watching the TV, not be working, not be driving, not be walking, you know, any of those things.
Well, that kind of leads us into how we eat. You know, some people I noticed, especially a few people that I met when they were brought up with, you know, many family members around the dinner table, they say they have to eat quickly before the food is finished or demolished by the other family members. So those people tend to eat very quickly, and obviously when you do, you don't chew very well. Whereas some other people, they kind of take their time, small bites, and chew really, really long time, and then they swallow. And I think how we eat, you know, it's very crucial as well, because it's like what you said, how we kind of digest the food. I remember someone told me that, you know, we have teeth in our mouth to help us to, you know, break down the food components. But once it's gone in there, you know, you don't have another set of teeth to help you do digestion. So the more we chew, the more we break down the food, the better for our digestive system. And obviously when we have a good gut, we got a better brain, we got better emotion, because our gut is actually our second brain.
And stronger immune system too. 70% of our immunity is in our gut. Yeah, for sure. How is huge. How and where, I think, are probably some of the biggest things that people overlook. Experts say for optimal digestion, we could chew our food, each bite, up to 30 times. Now, I invite our viewers to do a little experiment and just notice how many times you chew your food. 30 is a lot. I mean, it's liquefied. But one thing we can notice is, are we picking up a bite of food while we still have one bite of food in our mouth? So that's a really great tip. It's like, notice, put your fork down, put your chopsticks down, like just take a chill here, you know, and chew your food thoughtfully, and then pick up your next bite.
And count the 30 properly, rather than, you know, you can still rock through that 30 seconds. Make
30
it
is a lot, yeah.
make it last
Notice.
like a minute or so.
Notice, right?
Absolutely.
Notice. Okay, what's
Well,
the last
why
one?
we eat is the last one. And I think for me, this is interesting, because there are people who eat primarily to function, to train, to get their six pack, if not more. And there are people who don't mind anything. They simply eat for pleasure. I think the dilemma with many people face now is because food are so easily available, regardless of the quality. So, you know, why we eat a lot of time, some people, oh, you know, we just eat, you know, we're hungry, then we eat. But like what we said, you know, when we eat, are we actually hungry? Or is it just because, oh, you know, 7 o'clock, let's have dinner, or 4:30, let's have a cup of tea. But are we thirsty? Are we hungry? So there's a lots of mindless eating, if not habitual eating, that we're seeing. And of course, why we eat, for sure, everybody has to eat, you know, just to survive. But, you know, do we eat to function or for pleasure? I think there's a fine line between the two. For me, for one, I kind of leaning more onto pleasure if I could than to function, because I have a sweet tooth. If I could, I have had all the cookies and cakes in the world. But of course, that doesn't work because, it will literally just make me sick. So that's why it's always good to have a base. But for those people who are leaning onto the function, I think most people are trying to find the delicate balance between the two to make it enjoyable, but yet align with our why we eat. Some people choose, to train is the primary goal, and some other people I also know people who don't really care about what they eat, anything goes. They don't mind.
Yeah, I think understanding why we're doing anything is so important, right? And we talked about in the description for this episode, are we eating for nourishment, which could also be described as for function, if you're training. Are we eating for pleasure, which there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong. We should enjoy our food. It's a very big part of our lives. Or are we eating for success? And I suggest that we can eat for all three. If we really listen to what our body needs, we can hear how it needs to be fueled for function, for nourishment. We know what we love. We can enjoy the foods that we love. And when we have a nice balance of those, I think we're setting ourselves up for success.
Absolutely. I cannot agree, more with it. And especially being brought up in a family with home cooked food daily. Now that, I don't have my immediate family members around. So like now, if somebody cooks me food, not going to a restaurant where we just pay, but if somebody knows what I love to and cook me specifically for that, it's cooked with love, and everything has energy. So when the food is cooked well and intended and with love, it just tastes a lot better. Oh, and this is what I was going to show. This cookie, I was saying to Lisa. So this cookie was made by someone special in my household. And every time when we do SSKL, my daughter would go to the kitchen to see what's available in the pantry, not something that we buy from the supermarket. And she'll always bring me either a little piece of cake, katnum as we call it in Thai language, Thai sweet. And then this evening she brought me a chocolate chip cookie that was made today at home. So
that is so sweet. That is so sweet. I would love to know, before we wrap up, Kitty, if Steve would like to comment. Steve, if you would like to share what your philosophy is about eating and what you enjoy, go ahead and unmute yourself, but just up to you. Yeah. Okay. Maybe not.
Hi, ladies. Yeah, I agree. I agree with all you've said. I think you can achieve a balance between the three. Eat for function, eat for pleasure, and eat for nourishment. It is possible, but you need to pay attention, as you said, to your individual makeup and your individual body.
Fantastic.
Well said. Thank you, Steve. Well said. I couldn't have said it any better. You need to pay attention. Does it just all boil down to we need to bloody pay attention, Kitty? Do you think it's that simple?
It is, and I want most of our friends and audience to know Steve is also he specializes in nutrition, and he's a mentor and a coach as well. He's into his martial arts, so he brings in a wealth of knowledge and experience as far as fitness and health is concerned. So if you want to find out more about Steve, just go onto his Facebook page or Google his name, and he's out here to help other clients to lose fat, because he got a new book online now. So do check it out, and we'll post his link later.
We'll post those in the comments of the recording on your page. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those who are keen to lose some fat, Steve is the guy to go for. So now, we have to close to wrap up. So I just want to kind of wrap up what we've talked about. Let's eat. Food is important. We all love food, whether, you eat your mooncake or you eat your, homemade cookies or crisps or potato chips, however you say it. But it's all down to the 6W, as Lisa and I talked about, because for us, it's all bringing the awareness to, what do we eat, when we eat, who we are with when we eat, where we eat, how we eat, and why we eat. And the most important point is we've got to pay attention to how our body responds and how do we actually feel after the food that we've taken in. And if we feel good, does it align with why we eat? Because everyone eats for a purpose. And if it suits your purpose, then it's great. If it doesn't, then does it mean that we have to modify? There's no one recipe or one diet for us all. And I think everyone needs to pay attention. And, that's why we said secret for success is all coming back to self. It's all about paying attention to the self, which is the body at this point, especially we're talking about the food is, and of course, if physically we don't feel well, and then emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, nothing will be in balance. So what we eat is very important, and pay attention to how the 6Ws works out in our life, and more importantly, how do we feel after, the food we've consumed? Like Lisa was telling me that, her eyes are a bit puffed up today because she had some gluten last night. But maybe some people have, gluten issue like me. I have gluten intolerance as well. So all of this, of course, if we want to go down to the roots to talk about gluten, we can talk about it for days, but it really is about pay attention to how we respond each time we eat. If we feel sluggish, doesn't mean the food didn't go down as well as it is meant to be. So all of this is coming back to self and having awareness.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add, Lisa?
I'm hungry. It's time for me to go eat breakfast. That's what I want to add. No, I agree, Kitty. You summed it up really well. I love the way Steve put it. We just got to pay attention. Try something, see how it works, adjust from there.
Yeah. If in doubt, talk to the specialist.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think
great.
Good to go. Let's wrap up, and you tell people what we've got coming up next and when.
Well, we will be back in 2 weeks on Wednesday, and hopefully by then we won't have any problem streaming the Zoom session onto Facebook page. I don't know what happened tonight, but thank you, Steve, and whoever else is out there watching. And then we'll finalize the topic for next episode, and we'll let you know in due course. And thank you for joining us. And good evening, everyone from Asia.
Good morning from Kansas City. Have a great day, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Steve.